Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Christina with Chapter 1 and Beyond, and I'm really excited about this episode just because this is going to be a continuation off of my bonus episode and also the AI assistance episode that I did. I'm finally caught up, yay. Sorry I fell behind. I'm not really sorry, but I am sorry to myself because I have committed to this project and I feel like I've kind of deflated a little bit by falling behind, but it's okay. Nothing serious about this. So, um, but yeah, I'm going to expand a little bit more on the AI assistant, specifically ChatGPT. If you have not checked out that episode, definitely go check it out because I know I crazily went through like DeepSeek, Gemini, Google, and ChatGPT. But I really want to like organize my thoughts a little bit more and get dive a little bit more into how I'm using ChatGPT to help me through this hardest reading challenge you'll ever do 2.0. And honestly, even if you're not doing that reading challenge, I feel confident that everything I'm about to give you will give you pointers even to get through like your physical TBR or a challenge that you're trying to do. Because this can be applied across multiple things. Um, like I mentioned, I'm definitely gonna be showing my nerdy side. Because I don't think people realize what they have in their hands at this point. and and I know I'm gonna go real deep, but the fact that you think about like these things like, okay, well, this reading challenge seems impossible, but I want to figure out how many books I'm going to end up reading after I fulfill all 25 prompts if I'm that crazy, or if I just do one row, so on and so forth. I was trying to do the math myself and I was like, this is going to take me months to figure out. And ChatGPT was able to give me that answer within a 5 second time frame. so, um, so this is what I ended up doing. We're gonna dive right into it. So, I was really curious, like I said, about how like because each prompt has to fulfill with a book, and then each book can be used towards two different prompts, and there's 25 prompts, and each prompt seems like it has like at least 5 to 10 books per prompt. I was like, okay, I need to figure this out because normally in a given year, and I will be completely honest with you guys, I normally only read maybe like, if I'm lucky, 30 books a year, just because of how busy I get. But now that I've kind of adapted to audiobooks, I've been reading a heck of a lot more, and I'm really enjoying the fact that I can absorb books while I'm working. So, and it's great because I have opened up my you know my sights and reading perspectives to like new authors too, because the Libby app has really helped me a lot with like trying to expand my the recommendations. But the chat gpt um interface and the level of how much you can leverage if you use these prompts, it just completely changed the game for me. And something like this probably would have taken me months to plan, but I was able to do with a few simple steps and a few simple questions. But I literally had just put in, so for this reading challenge 2.0, it has 25 prompts and I can use 2 prompts per book. But it's looking like each prompt has at least 5 books to fulfill the prompt. How many books in all would I need to read in order to complete the whole bingo card? So and it responded and it said, all right, let's break this down and do some quick math. How many books you actually need to read to complete the entire bingo board for this reading challenge? So it took the amount of prompts divided by 2 per book, that's 12 and a half, roughly 13 books. But realistically, everything's not going to perfectly line up. So it originally had told me it calculated 17 books, but I had said, um, you know, but I see one prompt requires 7 books when some of them require 10. And that's when I started giving it more information about the prompts, like what I need to fulfill for each prompt. So it said perfect clarification that changes everything. So what it asked for was a detail of each of the 25 book prompts, and then it started to do the calculation. So I gave it all of the book prompts, and um, it was a very lengthy amount. I even gave it the prompt like titles and stuff, and it was like, okay, it definitely changed the way that we look at this. So for by the hundreds, we're gonna need 7 books to fulfill this. As many as you can read in 24 hours, that's gonna vary. So it put an estimate of, let's aim for 3, but really we don't know what that number is gonna look like. The series Stairway was definitely 10 books solidly, because in order to fulfill that prompt, you have to have a standalone, a duology, a trilogy, and then a 4+ book series. So that was 10 books there. The last 10 years, that was 10 books. All the adaptations, which actually I ended up fulfilling this prompt very fast, because if you don't do both, yeah, you get bonus points, but if you like do the original, like, you know, I'll get into that in a second, but that one required 8. The disability representation, that one's 5. Heritage months, 9. So basically, after putting in all that information, it took all those grand totals and it looked at 152 books without double counting. So that's a lot of books, and that's definitely impossible for me, because I have actually never surpassed the goal of hitting over 100 books in 1 year. So the fact that if you're factoring in like doubling up, it shows you the math that if you do 152 divided by 2, that's 76 books relatively. That's still way more than what I do in a current calendar year. So, but realistically, it's looking at 100 books. So I know deep down that this is probably going to be the longest stretch challenge that I ever do for myself. But at the same time, too, I love a good challenge, because like the fact that you can do audiobooks, you can do regular books, you can do ebooks. I mean, like the format does not matter. Like as long as you are consuming the book, it doesn't matter. So, so yeah, I mean, honestly, I was very intrigued, because like ChatGPT was able to just take the information I gave from the prompts, and it was able to do that calculation for myself. Otherwise, I would have been sitting here forever trying to do that. Now, expanding a little bit further, I asked it to help me plan out how I can maximize overlapping these books so that it fulfills 2 prompts, and it did help. It helped a lot. So I asked it, I gave it the image of the bingo board, and I said, can we please find optimal overlaps, as I do have a spreadsheet to track this challenge, and every prompt was going to focus on the first row, or the board. So I had mentioned I'm attaching the image, but at the same time too, can you help me plan out the most strategic overlap planning to utilize so that I can double up on these prompts? So it went through, and it was like, okay, well, based off of these prompts, this is how much you're going to need. And then it had said, an overlap strategy. So a sci-fi series that won or was nominated for a Goodread Choice Award could definitely hit the series Stairway subgenre of choice and award season. It could also go hand in hand with doubling up with a book with 200 pages. That's also part of your series. So that also helps by the hundreds. Reading 3 of these books in your 24-hour readathon also fulfills the as many in 24 hours. So remember though, with this challenge, I can only use one book for 2 prompts. So I'm like thinking the perfect overlap is if I have a book that's 250 pages, this can go hand in hand with the by the hundreds. If it's published within the last 10 years, that could even go hand in hand with it because that'll fulfill that prompt. The subgenres, I ended up originally I was thinking of going with fantasy, and I actually segued to sci-fi because I realized a lot of the books that are still on my TBR physical shelf is sci-fi. I feel like I'm really knocking through the fantasy reads, but at the same time too, my sci-fi is not going anywhere. so so what it did was the strategy that it had recommended is to fulfill the series stairway first, complete the by the 100s, and then do the subgenres for the sci-fi. That way, when you run out of the by the hundreds, you can also run out on the series stairway and the subgenres and etc. But the great thing is it kind of gives you this like conversational thing. It'll give you like questions back like, can you give me a list of all of your physical TBR books and titles, and if you happen to know if these are fantasy or if these are considered literary fiction or if it's considered nonfiction or if it's considered queer based. I was able to put all that information in. Yes, that took a little bit of time, especially since I'm taking this challenge a little bit step further and I'm telling it to take most of the books that I want to read from my physical TBR. So I'm not adding more to my list and my pile. So in essence, this reading challenge will not only help me stay focused on my physical TBR, but it'll also help me knock off like these ginormous prompts and maybe black out the board. We'll see. So, the second prompt that I had asked it was, do you think this is going to be humanly possible to complete in 12 months as a slow reader? And I was really curious on what ChatGPT was going to say because after giving it all of the rules, all of the point values, all of the prompts, it literally I was literally curious like what ChatGPT's AI model was gonna say. And it's funny because like it really is like quirky and like conversational and empathetic to you. Like it's very conversational. So like the response was, this is such a smart, honest, and important question. I love that you're thinking realistically about your time and reading pace. Let's work through it together with some gentle math and honesty, then see what it means for you. What are you actually aiming for? Based on your estimates from before, even with excellent overlaps, your likely minimum is around 100 books. That's if you double up smartly without overlap, it would be 150 books. But we're aiming for strategic multi prompt reading. So, what does that mean over a 12-month span? So 100 books over the course of 12 months is roughly about 8 to 9 books per month, which means that I would have to consume 2 plus books per week. But as a slow reader, my natural pace is around 1 book every couple of weeks. That still shorts me because that's about 26 books a year roughly, give or take. But yeah, I mean it's an aggressive reading challenge, but it says it's humanly possible. So like is the next question it asked me, so is it humanly possible? Technically yes, it's possible, but realistically for a self-described slow reader, it would be extremely demanding and likely to steal your joy. So I had also mentioned to it within this conversation that I can technically consume the book and the content via audio, and I've been consuming like books that way while I have to work 40 hours a week. And it does say to it does recommend that this should be a 2-year challenge, but that is the whole thing around this. Like, try to squeeze it as much as you can in, and I'm just curious on how much I can fulfill of that board. So, the great thing is that it points out that the real win here is that I'll have explored new authors and genres, make smart reading choices, and you know, really go above and beyond the reading record that I have for that year. So no matter how many total books, it's going to help me in the long run. So in my opinion, like, even after talking through the amount of books, yes, it's a huge mountain of books that have to be read, but if I can knock off 100 books off of my shelf, that means I would only have maybe 150 some more books to read after this. Because if you guys remember the first start of this, I had over 250 physical books on my shelf. So far, I'm getting very, very close to filling up the second row on my second shelf, which means that this is working. This is working real well. so, um, so yeah. But yeah, let's dive into some more prompts. So the next thing I asked it, is it strategic to consume by audiobook, or is it would it be more substantial to mix it up to print audiobooks and ebook? And it did say that you can layer formats strategically. So, like, for long commutes or chores or adult responsibilities that many of us do, absorb it by audiobook. Not saying that's a bad thing. And then if you do actually have time to sit down and read, you can always pick up the ebooks or the print. So I thought that was great that it kind of pointed out, like, hey, this is how you can kind of get more reading time in if you are this busy. Like, don't let it daunt you from like your goal. And it, realistically, there are 3 ways that you can black out this board, and it does go through all that. Mainly the fact that it does recommend tearing through novellas and graphic novels, and then also tearing through a lot of audio. If you're looking at it from the perspective of getting this board completely blacked out within a record time, multi formats is going to be your friend. So, and that's what ChatGPT is telling me. I'd be really curious if I do utilize this strategy, if it would actually work. So, I guess, like, the other caveat of this challenge is to see how accurate ChatGPT will get me to fulfilling this board. So, I think that's a win-win too. So, the other prompt that I gave it originally was going to go with just one row at a time, but it made more sense to tell it to look at the full board, because then it can do that calculation across all the prompts as opposed to just 5 prompts. It can look at the 25 prompts. So, and it definitely agreed. It said, yes, I would love to do this reading optimization puzzle with you. I can handle it. I was getting real funny with it. I'm like, are you gonna fry if I like give you all 25 of these prompts and you're trying to figure it out? And it like, it just, it pretty much said, I live for this, so let's just do this. So, yeah. So I just kept going in and feeding it the information it needs, because, like, as you give it information, it'll ask you for more information back. So, for example, I asked it, how long will it take you to process through the most optimal strategy to this challenge? And it said, oh, just a couple of minutes. So I thought that was pretty funny. But it did ask me for that list of books. What I ended up having to do is put my physical TBR by title, author, page number, genre, subgenre, um, and then what prompt I thought it would fulfill, and put it into a CSV file and then attach it to the prompt. So there were a lot of books that I personally did not know what the genres were. To be honest, a lot of these books have been on my shelf and I've not been able to look at them. And that's why I'm in this mess, is because I just get so, consumed by, hey, look at the shiny coin. so, um, so yeah, so what it did was the first thing it wanted me to do was get that organized. That took me just a couple of minutes because I have these awesome trackers on hardcover, and I actually started using Storygraph recently because the hardest reading challenge you'll ever do 2.0, there is a challenge on Storygraph, so I can track my prompts that way as well. But it does not exclude you from still having to submit. It's just a nice way, like if you're on Storygraph, you have another way of tracking it. But I thought that was pretty cool, and I was really curious on how everyone's kind of gravitating towards Storygraph. So my tech sense, I was like, yeah, this is a win-win too. So I did give it the full bingo board. I gave it my full list of the books. Now, if I didn't have a book that was fulfilled within that prompt, it did mention, like, hey, you may have to go to the library or the bookstore to get this book. And I think as I go along, I will be asking it follow up questions like, hey, I've already used this book on two other prompts. Like, what can I use to fulfill maybe two others? Originally, you had, planned me to utilize this towards adaptations and in the last 10 years, but I've already filled up the adaptations prompt. So it's very conversational. And what I'm getting at is if you just keep asking it for more detail, it'll give you more detail. It'll ask you questions to help it clarify. So, so yeah, so once I was able to get that in there, um, it did ask me to do because it needed to categorize in some way, shape, or form these books in this list in the CSV file. So the ones that I had no idea what they were, it did it in batches. It did it in, like, I think 15 books at a time or something like that. I think maybe like it started getting higher and higher, but all I did was I put, I don't know what the genres are, and it actually went out and did that search for me. So it ended up tagging and categorizing the books as it needed to. So once it got through my entire list, that CSV file, we then had to go through and have ChatGPT do the count of which prompts would be the most optimal. So once it did that, I was really starting to see, what prompts I could potentially fill up first and then kind of work my way through. A lot of the books that I've chosen in the last not even 48 hours have been audiobooks. I will say that. It's technically not cheating, but it's technically helping me in the long run too. So, and then like the adaptations one, I thought I had to read the book that it kind of interprets off the adaptation. So, like in the Lives of Puppets, that was like a looser version of like Pinocchio. That's the classic story of that one. So I thought, oh well, I could just read in the lives of puppets. Well, I found out that for the web series and stuff, technically Stranger Things it can be categorized in that. And I was like, interesting. So it isn't all just like consumption of books, it is consumption of like graphic novels or watching something like a movie or a play or a musical or whatever. Now, I will say that I did find a recording of the musical Wicked and I was able to watch that. And honestly, I've never seen the play Wicked in person, but I've seen the movie adaptation of Wicked, which is also an adaptation of a book, so by Gregory Maguire. But so that counted towards my adaptations. But Les Mis, there's this one book that I'm reading right now for the subgenres of choice. It's called Sky Without Stars by Jessica Brody and another author. Absolutely amazing book so far. Don't get me wrong. It kind of reminds me of like a retelling of Les Mis, but the fact that I was able to utilize the movie for Les Mis, I was able to fulfill that portion of that prompt as well. So, like, if you're trying to really dive into, um, you know, trying to dive into utilizing AI at its finest, I would say it does very well with planning. As long as you go step by step and you don't feel that overwhelmed, I think you'll be fine. For someone that has never used AI to plan things, this has been like a game changer for me. All I need to do is just give it what I'm wanting to do, tell it what my goal is, and it will give me recommendations and it like remembers those key list of books that I had put in. Because like it will save that into memory and it will learn off of like, hey, since you're talking about this subject, because you do have to keep mentioning, like if you walk away like a couple days ago that you were talking about this challenge on ChatGPT, you just have to remind it, hey, on the topic of this hardest reading challenge you'll ever do 2.0, what do you recommend as a suggestion for a book recommendation for the prompt, the queer alphabet? And there were actually some categories with um, that I was like, okay, I have no idea what gender fluid means. But that's the whole point of this challenge is to kind of educate you a little bit more. So I was even asking ChatGPT, like, hey, what does gender fluid mean? Like, you get my drift. Like, you can kind of go down a rabbit hole. And honestly, I was probably on this for quite some time, just trying to plan out how I was going to strategize like going forward. But the great thing is that with these prompts that I'm giving you, it it will walk you step by step through this process. So like say you have I'll think of another example besides just the hardest reading challenge you'll ever do. Um, Say you have a readathon. Say you want to try to strategize how to read as many books as possible within a 24-hour period. Hey, that's a great example because guess what? You can punch into ChatGPT or Gemini or even DeepSeek and it'll be like, okay, the exact prompt you should give it is my goal is to read as many books as humanly possible within 24 hours. What books of this list do you recommend tackling through to get the most books out of my reading day? And you can also prompt it, once it gives you that, I would do a follow up question and be like, how can I structure my day to make this happen? So, and it'll ask you questions. It'll ask you questions like, hey, what factors come into play, like eating, drinking, um, taking responsibility for taking care of your kids, because you should never neglect your kids just to read books. Um, so, I mean, like, honestly, it will, like in that sense, that's another prompt you can give it. Um, Now, say for example, you have a situation where you're trying to figure out how to plan, like, you know, tackling this bookshelf, or how long it'll take you to read through your physical TBR. That was another question I asked it. Okay, so this is the next prompt that I did. So now that you know what my physical TBR looks like, how long do you think it would take me to read through my physical TBR as a 120 word per minute reader and almost 250 physical books on my shelf? And it responds, great question. Let's break it down with some estimates using your information. Physical TBR is around 250 books. Average reading speed is around 120 words per minute. Average book length typically is 90,000 words. Ranges could average around 70,000 to 100,000. So for each 90,000 word book, time to read would be around 12 and a half hours. So it gave me actually in hours estimate. So total reading time would be, this is the formula: 250 times 12.5 hours equals 3,125 hours. How long is that really? So if I read for 1 hour every day, it'll take me 8.5 years to read through my physical TBR. If I read for 2 hours per day, it'll take me 4.25 years relatively. And that's if I commit to every single day and these amount of hours. It also gave me an estimation: if I read for 4 hours per day, it'll take me 2.1 years. So like pretty much it did the math, and it explains like some books are shorter, so they may take less than 12 and a half hours. If you mix the formats like audio and ebook and things like that, that will tend to speed up and shorten your time period. But yeah, this is like the detail. And then the follow-up question that it asked me: if you want, we can make a custom table for different book lengths, or build a TBR burn down calculator that adjusts for your reading speed in hours per week. Want me to do that? Just say so. So like, even if you ask it to do those calculations, it'll give you like, hey, do you want to build something now? Do you want to like kind of you know, uh get a tracker or something, because like I know with even asking it about um the HRCYED 2.0 challenge, it was even asking me, hey, do you need a tracker? I can create a spreadsheet for you on how to track it. And obviously, Quarty has already put together a spreadsheet and a full gambit of stuff to track it. Um, so yeah, I didn't need it. But the great thing is, when I did the planning, it did create like a PDF document of, kind of breaking down every month. So yeah, you need to read about 8 to 9 books per month. So here's like a list of what you can initially do, and then kind of plan from there, and what prompts you would need to fulfill. So um, so yeah, like that is the power of ChatGPT. Now, let's say for example, you don't want to type out all of those books, and you just want to go through and record yourself like saying the titles and the names of the authors for each of the books that you have. I would actually recommend doing Gemini for that specific planning, because Gemini is a lot more efficient when it comes to like video and audio files. I have found with experience that ChatGPT is only so good and great as long as you're being conversational and text wise. So if you do not want to type all that out, I usually recommend a different method if you're going to do a video or an audio file. I'd be curious too, like if if I were to create like an audio file of all the prompts, I'm wondering how it would handle, and maybe that could be a future episode. I don't know, but um, just kind of keep that in mind that each of these AI assistants have their own like little splooge of stuff for the process. So, um, now when it comes to like individual prompts, and I believe I touched on this earlier, and I believe this is going to probably be the last subject that I talk about. Now, if you're looking to expand on like book recommendations, I know I keep mentioning as much detail as possible, but say, for example, you're trying to find indie authors, so you're trying to find like self published books and things like that. You can put into your prompt that when you ask for like a sci fi recommendation or you're looking for a fantasy recommendation, also put in the detail of that question, which is a prompt if you haven't found out by now, but a prompt is a question you give to the AI. Um, but what you'll need to do is you'll need to absolutely make sure that you specify, hey, I'm looking for a self published author in the science fiction genre. Can you give me 5 recommendations that will cover this criteria? And it will give you. And then if you give like, your mood and like if you're a mood reader or if you're into like epic fantasy versus soft fantasy versus you know, cozy fantasy and things like that. Um, the more, like I said, like I keep saying, it's the more specific, the better, because it'll give you a more refined list and it'll be a lot more accurate. Now, sometimes ChatGPT does miss. Um, I have noticed that when I was trying to plan out my full year with the bingo board for HRCYED 2.0, I noticed that a lot of the recommendations that it had put together in this PDF for me were duplications, assuming that I didn't read it in the previous month, vice versa. Now, if I did read it in the previous month, then I'd have to go back to ChatGPT and try to plan for accommodating for that double. So, what I'm saying is, I would just double check to make sure that it's accurate. Um, Always like cross reference. I personally use like Goodreads and Google. And honestly, I even like kind of feed it into Gemini, like just to see how accurate ChatGPT is, because sometimes ChatGPT can get it wrong, and you do have to give it feedback in order for it to improve. So there is an up and a thumbs up and a thumbs down. So if you feel that it's not accurate, you do thumbs down and give it the feedback, like, hey, this platform was telling me this, but you're giving me this. So, and that's how it improves. That's how it learns. That's how all of this is going to become more efficient in the long run. But I hope that the information that I did expand on in this episode helped you. Um, I'd be curious if any of you guys listening have used AI assistants and it helped you kind of go through a reading challenge of your own. I would love to hear from you. I'm going to put my Discord server in the link below. I hope you have a wonderful day, and until next time, happy reading.